From the Green Room Studios at Bates Nursery in Nashville, Tennessee, it's Gardening Inside Out, a podcast with highlights from our Saturday morning live show, answering all your gardening questions, giving you plant advice for any space in your life. Let's start the show.
Hey, everybody. Caroline Gant here.
Hey, everybody. Austin Lowen here.
Greetings. It's Tyler Blankenship.
We're all here.
Together again.
On this awful, awful day.
I was about to say, and we're happy to be inside right now because here in Nashville, it is gross outside.
Gross is the word. Started out raining. Now the wind is at an all-time high. Not all-time high, but it's up there.
That would be a tornado.
That'd be bad.
It feels like a tornado. It's awful.
It's pretty bad. It got really cold, but you know,
The squall line,
it's about to get colder.
the squall line goes all the way down to like Belize in the Yucatan Peninsula
Look at
on this
you go.
storm.
Wow.
Wow.
It's massive.
Yeah, today's the preface, I guess, of what's to come. We have some nasty stuff up ahead. Today's
Winter
what?
weather is upon us finally.
Finally, yes.
Snowed in.
We were talking a lot about our plants earlier and how a lot of things have not even lost their leaves from last year yet. Like deciduous things that like typically lose their leaves. I've got a rose, a Chihuly rose in a pot, which is beautiful. And it's like maroon fall color and it's got every single leaf still on it. Has not even shed at all.
So are you going to bring that in when it goes to zero here next week?
No.
Leaving it out.
Yeah.
Some people would bring it in. I was just wondering. I didn't think you would.
No.
But I'm sure our listeners would have been on the edge of their seats to know.
I'm ready for the leaves to fall off.
You're ready to see those thorns.
Yeah. It's time.
It is
Get rid of
time.
them old yuck leaves. And I want to see some new ones in the spring. Not yet.
Well, while we're on the topic of plants coming in and this, 0 degree weather coming, I know a lot of people are going to be asking, what do they need to prepare for?
Mm-hmm. And in my mind, really, I don't think there's anything you can do. I mean, people talk about, should I cover my plants or whatever? And it's like, we really only cover our plants whenever they flush in the spring and they've got new growth. And then we really want to keep that frost off of the foliage because it'll burn back the foliage. But, the old hardened off leaves that are up, I mean, if you throw a cover over top in 0 degree weather, it's going to be 0 degrees underneath that blanket too. Like it's going to go right through that.
Still going to get cold.
I don't think there's anything you can do. I mean,
Yeah, I tried blankets when we had that deep freeze. That was different, but that did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's the same temp out there versus under there, unless you put like a heater around it or something, or like built a little hoop house over top of it and like heated it. Maybe that would be helpful, but honestly, I think we've been cold enough. Last year was such a weird thing to where we were so warm and it was 60 degrees during the day and dropped to 0 that night within hours. So that's a lot different.
Any kind of significant cold weather, really.
Exactly. And, we've had a mild winter so far, but still mild is relative. We've had definite, I've had 20 degrees in my house. I've had 19 degrees in my house, and we've had plenty of mid-20s, low 30s. Like, that should be plenty of time for our plants to be hardened off enough to where they can handle a 0 degree night.
I'm not doing anything.
We're mainly talking about the plants that were affected by that freeze, which are broadleaf evergreens to a larger extent.
Exactly.
Like Austin's rose, it's meant to drop its leaves.
Exactly.
This is the trigger for that plant to do that. And it can withstand those cold temperatures in dormancy.
Yes. So it's been... And this week, too, is a good week for a dip down to 0. And honestly, it is just a dip down to 0 one night, So, I mean...
Well, the next night is 6.
Yeah,
so,
I know. It's not great. But, it's... I don't think it's going to be a flash freeze event like we had last year, which, like you mentioned, Tyler, the broadleaf evergreens, the laurels, the akuba, the boxwoods, the hollies, lost their leaves, which they never do. So that was super rare. But I don't think that that's going to happen this year, based on the weather we've already had.
I remember we're going to feel it more than the plants are.
I agree.
We're going to be bigger babies about it. We already are.
I mean, this has happened before, a drop around the new year down to single digits. I can remember in 2014, I believe there was one.
Well, it's wintertime. It's going to happen.
But it didn't really harm any plants on any large scale. No. Now, my mom's Norfolk Island pine that she's been keeping on her porch.
Well, that's going to need to come in.
Yeah. She didn't even realize, because it had been kind of milder up until now, that it wasn't hardy. She had gotten it on a clearance from a garden center and had it out there, but you could already see it was taking a little bit of cold damage, a little yellowing on the outer bits. And I was like, you're probably going to want to put that inside.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh yeah, that'll be gone. It'll be toast if she doesn't.
Mm-hmm. It would, man.
But again, it's winter. We're getting it.
That's right.
What do we think about like things like rosemary and lavender? Do you think that my rosemary died eventually after about 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't really have any like severe winter events, but we had also done some pruning on it before we got some of that February, March cold.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that those could be affected?
I do think those could potentially be affected. Yeah, I mean their hardiness zone is. I think it goes down to about 0 if I'm right about that. Maybe 0 to 10 or something like that. So
Yeah.
it is possible. Now, like I said, it is one night of 0 and then one night of 6. So after that, we can see how the warm up happens. Prolonged 0 degrees is one thing. One night of it, 2 nights of it in the single digits maybe won't affect it all that bad. A lot of times that the cold isn't necessarily what gets rosemary and lavender in Nashville. It's our wet.
Yeah.
Our winters are so wet here, y'all. It doesn't snow very often. All snow is happening soon. We'll talk about that in a minute. But rain happens in February, late January into February. It's just a wet, cold, rain, awful event in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah.
We love our springs here. We have a pretty good fall here. Summers are hot, but we're used to it. But man, our late winter is awful.
Wet, sad, and ugly.
Gray.
What's not wet, sad, and ugly right now, though, is my lavender. It looks great.
Good.
I'm not going to try to protect it.
Nice.
If it's time to go, it's time to go. Mm-hmm. I'll let it go.
I will say, too, go ahead, Tyler.
No, my phenomenal is still in a pot, still the same size it was when I planted it in spring. Hasn't grown a lick.
Oh, great.
Next to my dormant
Did you buy fake
mint.
lavender? Is that what happened?
No, it was
you don't
real.
know if it's fake?
I bought it from Bates, Caroline.
Jade might have
real.
snuck one in there. I don't know.
She's not sneaky like that.
That's true.
Well,
she's great.
I will say one good thing we got going for us is that with those really cold temperatures, we are supposed to have snow with that, which snow is a great insulator
Yep.
around plants. So like 0 degrees with no cloud cover and like a clear morning, that's cold and that is not friendly for plants.
Brutal.
Mm-hmm. But when you have good cloud cover and you have snow packed around the plants, then a much, much better insulator and you'll see much less damage, I would assume.
I think everything's going to be just fine.
Yeah,
like
I'm
I
not worried
said,
about it.
I'm not looking forward to it for myself and my body when I'm outside, but plants will be okay.
I will say though, I'm just a touch nervous. Because,
no.
just a touch nervous.
The boxwoods.
Y'all know, if you've listened to this at all, I had a boxwood fiasco last year in the deep freeze. They did die, straight up died. Well, I dropped some money for myself for Christmas, and I got more. Planted them.
How many more, just in case they don't know?
12.
12 more. Justin Brower boxwoods.
And they are a little less hardy than some other boxwoods.
Are you going to put little boxes over them with heaters?
No, like I said, that's not going to do anything.
Oh,
I said with heaters.
No, not with heaters. I'm not going to go out and buy 12 heaters for my tiny little boxwoods. God dang. But I am a touch nervous. I think they're going to be fine.
They'll be fine.
I'm not all that worried about it, but I am a touch worried about it.
Like we've talked about, we're going to have snow that insulates it, plus the temperature's not dropping like 50 degrees in the matter of 3 hours like it did last year. We've already had freezing temperatures. Austin, they'll be okay.
You're making me feel better.
They're going to be fine.
Still a touch nervous.
My lavender might not be, but like I said, doesn't really live here anyways.
Yeah, it can.
It can, but
My greenhouse, I'm interested to see how it will perform with no thermal mass inside it except for the plants that are in it and a heater, an infrared heater. So far, it's been holding pretty well around 53 degrees, even during the lowest, like 20-something nights.
Oh, it's going to be good then. Mm-hmm. Let's just hope we'll see what the snow cover does, because that's one of the biggest things that especially nurserymen and greenhouse people are worried about is how much snow you actually get with weight on top of greenhouses that will just crumple some greenhouses. So
well,
as long as the structure is good, you built the structure out of wood, right?
I did.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
All of the trusses are like at least 24 to 30 inches spaced apart.
Yeah,
with a lattice structure for the roof to support the roof underneath. So I'm not worried about a snow load on that little guy.
Yeah, that is good. But that is a nasty wrecker of a greenhouse.
But yeah, for those of you with plastic over hoops, you might want to make sure to get out there and dust that off.
Yeah,
if it gets too heavy.
Definitely.
Don't want to lose it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into this week's broadcast. I believe it was Saturday, January 6th.
It was.
It is already 2024, our first broadcast of the new year.
All right.
Enjoy.
Let's get it.
Yeah.
No shortage of questions, but before we get into that, of course, we're all busily preparing for springtime, which will be here before you know it. So what are the things that are on your mind this morning before we dive into these backlog of questions we've got?
Ooh, pottery.
Pottery.
So much pottery. We unpacked how many pallets? At least 24 in the last
I think
3 days.
Yeah, 3 days of solid, heavy lifted pottery work. Caroline has to use her brain and go in and check everything and scan everything and not scan everything, sticker everything.
You were close. It was an S word. So.
And then me, Ben, Owen,
John, Mac, Lauren,
all of them have been very helpful with moving it, getting it around. We've had probably the most efficient pottery put up that I think we've ever really had.
Yeah, it's been a great team this year. But good pottery is a great investment. I have some pieces out in my landscape. I love a good, cool looking giant pot with like some sort of specimen in it, or using it for annuals, but having something really large amongst your landscaping, it looks so good. And I mean, some of these pots are like $500, but really in the long run, it's totally worth it. Those are going to last maybe forever, as long as, you don't run into them with a riding lawnmower or something and take it out.
I've got 2 pots on my front porch that I've had for years now, and I got them from Bates because one of my family members got me a $100 gift card. No, it was like one of those Visa gift cards or whatever, and I decided to use it for 2 really nice pots. I bought those like 5 years ago. It was $100. I spent like $180 on 2 pots, and still on my front porch today that I decorate every single spring and fall. So love them. It is a good investment. They don't go bad.
Speaking of pots on porches, my mixed planters that I made this fall, we put the pictures up, look stunning right now. The snapdragons, they're not blooming, but the leaves look great. The foliage looks fantastic. That rainbow ascot euphorbia that I put in there, I'll bring a picture next week. I mean, nothing looks sad right now in either pot. So I'm really excited to see how it does as we move into, February, where it's going to get a lot colder.
Yeah, the premium pansies are popping at the proving grounds. I'm telling you, it's gorgeous this year.
Yeah, pansies are doing great right now.
Are.
One of my favorite gardening things to do is a big, nice mixed container. When you're done with it, it's so good. I had a guest yesterday come back and show me a picture of hers that I did for her. This was about 2 weeks ago. And she has like kind of a shady front porch-ish. And I helped her get a mix going. We got a nice flow in the pot.
Oh, that was a gorgeous pot. You sent me a picture because it wasn't working, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, and she came back yesterday and showed me a picture of it, and she was like, I am in love with this. I walk in every day and I see it, and I just love it. And
I'm
had
like,
that's great.
Cast iron
Plant in the
Hellebore,
back. Just
and
being
heuchera,
up tall and
right?
awesome. Heuchera in the middle with that red foliage, and then a Hellebore right out in front that was blooming a similar color to the heuchera. It really worked. I was proud of it, and she was happy with it, so... Cool.
It was a gorgeous planter.
It was.
So let's start with some winter questions. We got quite a few questions on planting stuff in the winter here. First question, thoughts on when to start cool season seeds in a cold frame?
Not quite yet. I mean, you can do it now. That's the great thing about seeds is they'll just sit dormant with the cold weather. So if you really wanted to get out and you're itching to do something, like it's not a bad idea to go ahead and sow some seed. They're just not going to germinate quite yet. They will germinate whenever the weather is right. So honestly, doing it now, you can keep it controlled in a cold frame. You're not going to have wind and rain and all that type of stuff that's on top of seeds that could move them where you don't want them. So if you can keep them in a controlled spot in your cold frame, I mean, if you're ready to do it, do it. You don't necessarily have to do it yet. But when the weather warms up and that cold frame heats up like it's going to with the sunshine in the, probably late February into March, you'll start to see warmer temps and you might see some germination. So it's a fun little project to do. I mean, we're not doing anything else at the moment. Not too much.
Yeah, there's not a lot going on. How about good veggies for Nashville winter?
There's a lot of herbs that are okay and like, evergreen herbs that will stay up through our winter here. When it comes to veggies, not so many minus like, kale is a very cold, hardy vegetable.
I had one grow for 3 years and never died back. It was a tree.
Yeah,
at
like
the time
they're
I was
almost
done with it.
perennial here, and they pretty much are. I went to a buddy's house the other day who's really gotten into gardening, and I stopped by to look at his garden plot that he's got. And by far the best looking thing in his garden was his kale. And it was up and big, and he's still munching on it.
Wow.
You know, my brother Mark has a cold frame he's built over his little garden spot, and he turned some incandescent light bulbs on really cold nights. He still has lettuce.
Lettuce too.
He's picking lettuce throughout the winter, so long as it doesn't get severely cold. Unfortunately, to this point, we haven't really had anything that's all that severe.
Yeah,
No,
but
you're right.
so far my rosemary's doing good. I've still got some cilantro. I've got sage. I mean,
I've got all that. Yeah.
Hey, great point with the cilantro right there, Josh.
Yeah.
That's a hard one for us to grow in the summertime because it bolts so bad and it wants to go to seed and it
great.
flowers. But growing that as a cool season herb is the way to do it. So,
I remember somebody here saying that they grew snow peas, I believe, or sugar snap peas, but also to get them to flower, they had to start them really early, like in January.
Yeah, I start mine not that early, but
or February.
I
or
love
something.
growing them so much. All right, how about bulbs? We got like 3 or 4 questions about is it too late to plant bulbs here? Tulips, daffodils, all those spring bloomers.
no, I don't think it's too late to do that. The problem is finding those bulbs,
Right.
or getting them. And that's going to be the tricky thing. I know we're just about out.
We're
aren't we?
about out of them. Yeah.
So, I mean, most people have beat you to it is the problem with that. Now, if you want to like mail order some bulbs or something to you, I'd say you better start getting on it and getting them in the dirt. So, I mean, most of the bulbs, like David talks about, are usually pre-chilled. So they'll still come up and set leaves and then flower after that. So I don't see anything wrong with
Is there a
doing that.
freshness date or a label on them like there is for grass seed?
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, and the worst thing that'll happen is that they flower a bit later.
Yeah.
And if you've already bought the bulbs, you just didn't get around to planting
Right.
them. Of course, it's a really good time to go ahead and do that.
Go ahead and do it. All right, and our last winter seed and bulb question is, can I winter sow native perennial seeds? Yes. We talked about that a little bit last week, about how I let my kind of wildflower garden bed just go to seed in the winter, and then I'll sow some more. So yeah, you can absolutely do it now. You just have to watch them being washed out if we get a big rain.
Yeah, and you just made a good point. Just think about nature. What do perennials do? They flower, they set seed, they hold on to that seed until they dry up enough, and then they fall off of that plant, or birds take them elsewhere, or something happens, and then they germinate in the spring. So you can control that a little bit better by putting them where you want them and trying to keep them there. But we want to try to mimic nature as much as possible, and that's when the perennials set their seed, is typically during this time, is whenever they're laying on the ground and getting cool and getting moist and ready to pop when the weather turns.
And also leaving my seeds up for the wildlife, for the birds. They come in and they help scatter them a little bit. They eat a bunch of them, so it's not overly seeded. So nature does its own little work. So we had a viewer that received some hellebore for Christmas. Will it be too warm indoors? Yes, would be what I would say.
Well, they don't want to be indoors. I mean, it's a cold, hardy, evergreen perennial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just talked about how you put it in some mix planters, some winter mix planters. So
Yeah, and I did that in mind because it is an evergreen. And then heuchera is pretty much an evergreen if it's protected. In this specific spot this woman had, it was up underneath her covered front porch. So it was not going to be getting hit with frost and freeze and all that. So I thought we're going to put that heuchera in there too because it's mostly evergreen. And then cast iron plant in the back that's certainly evergreen that'll stay up. But hellebore, I don't see any reason why you would want to bring it in your home. I mean, it's time to get that in the garden bed. Find your spot where you want it and just plant it.
They're not looking really pretty right now. I mean, we're a little early, but I mean,
yeah, my leaves look great right now that I have in ground.
Yeah, leaves are
but there's
good.
no blooms.
Yeah, there's not quite blooms yet. In our greenhouse now, you will come out here and see hellebore in pretty much full bloom.
Wow.
Now, those have been forced in a greenhouse, and they're a little bit tricked into being.
They've been fooled.
They've been fooled to bloom. But like you said, Josh, out around town, they're not blooming quite yet, but they will be soon. They're one of the first perennials to bloom.
They do not waste any time getting on with the flowering. And it is true that we don't really force them. We just have them indoors, and with the little bit of protection that affords them, they are naturally going to be a bit more advanced to whatever might be outside. And certainly getting them, they're very adept at dealing with cold conditions. So it doesn't mean that if you put them out, if you planted those now, that you you might need to cover them if we had cold weather coming up. But if it's only down into the 20s for low temperatures, probably not.
Yeah,
You know,
no.
And that's
they're
a
really
great
tough.
idea about putting them in a container, Austin. I mean, it really is. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it. The only thing that the problem is that they just do their thing so early. They finish so early that for the rest of the year, you just have leaves.
I love the leaves on them, though.
They're okay.
Okay.
I mean,
I think they're great.
You know me and just leaves.
Yes.
I
We
want to
know
see
you
something
and leaves.
flowering.
You love flower power is your
Motto.
note. Speaking of hellebores, Pam Eldridge on the Bates page said hers are beautiful right now. So sounds like she likes her leaves.
She likes them leaves.
Just like me.
Well, that's okay.
Well, mine
They're
aren't
going to
in
be
the-
more beautiful soon.
yeah, mine aren't in the
gosh,
best
yeah.
spot because they get a little bit more sun than they probably should. So that's why I was thinking about. I think I'm going to put some in one of the new pots that I got. And bring them around so we can keep them a little bit more shaded.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what my daughter's hellebore plantation looks like. So maybe we'll see that this weekend.
It's
We need a
also a
picture.
good idea to go in and clean up any
Right.
like nasty leaf that came from last year. So get it back clean with nice clean foliage,
Okay.
and then in that early spring when you see that flower, you also see a flush of growth. So that flush will be very, very clean. So get rid of any leaves that have like black. A lot of times hellebore can go like black spotty.
That's what I'm saying.
Go ahead and clean that up. Get rid of it. I'm done with it.
Done with it.
New year, new leaves.
New year, new
yes.
leaves. Wow. I love that. All right, we got a question on the Bates page. When is the best time to plant new trees, specifically evergreens?
Right now.
3:30.
Yeah, you
3:30.
There it is.
Josh is looking at his watch. What time is it, Josh?
it's
Not 3:30
8:18.
yet.
Really, any tree, y'all. This is a great time to do it. Avoid the dead of the summer. We talk about it all the time. Dead of the summer is a horrible time to plant trees. It's hard on you. It's hard on the plant. But this time of year, it's great. A good, adequate rainfall typically.
It's my favorite time to plant
Yeah, and
anything.
if you come
Well,
out
not
to the
anything.
nursery this morning, I noticed it coming in because I was looking around because I love the view that we have across the right in front of the garden center there. It's a great time to see what a lot of your foundation plants are going to look like this time of year.
Great point.
They got a winter look to
Yeah,
it.
you get your winter look as well as the other thing that's going on with it, and they're
And the-
glorious.
And the conifers particularly
Yep.
accentuate that really
Yep.
well, as far as the winter color that many of them take on is really the dramatic show that you get as far as winter color goes. So it's easy to we all miss flowers this time
Oh,
of year,
yeah.
but we don't like for color if you do a little planning on the front end and prepare to have some things in the landscape that kind of take up the slack color wise as you go into the winter season.
Gardening Inside Out is brought to you by Earth Mix Garden Products, creating regionally sourced high-quality soil blends and amendments for the sustainable-minded gardener. Fall and winter are great times to plant in the Southeast, and Earth Mix can help you with Landscape Soil Conditioner. Mix landscape with your native soil to feed all winter long. Added mycorrhizal fungi help your plants get established faster and increase hardiness through the year ahead. Visit earthmix.net for more information and retailers near you. Remember, success begins at the ground level when you use Earth Mix garden products.
Risha is asking, she has several healthy large clumps of catmint and assume that they might lose their foliage when things get cold, but they haven't. They need to be pruned. Can I just cut them back to a smaller size now, or should I wait till spring?
No, you can go ahead and do it now if you want. But I will say, Reesh, that's pretty cool. I mean, if you've already got your catmint and it's still up and it looks clean and good, then I don't see any real reason to get rid of it
Mine
yet.
is still, my Walker's Low is still up really high and doesn't look fantastic up top. It still does have some leaves, but there's a lot of really healthy, perfectly looking new growth down at the base of the plant, right at the soil line. So I'm about to cut mine back probably this week.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And if your foliage is leggy and up there and not looking all that great or whatever, like Caroline said, all that new flush is going to come from the base of that plant, and it is going to be clean and green in the spring. It's going to look great. So at any point over the winter time, when you're ready to get rid of those old stems, go ahead and get rid of them. Let that new stuff come up in the spring and let it be beautiful.
I love it. Mine grows over my sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
Catmint's
Magical.
amazing.
All right, what's the best time of year to plant ferns outside? I tend to plant mine in the spring, but I'm sure now would be great.
I mean, it depends. There's most ferns are not evergreen. There are a few that are. So if you do come out to the nursery, you'll see a lot of ferns that are just cut back and basically a pot of dirt and roots. So you can certainly.
Autumn fern are nice though.
Autumn fern's great. They're already up and they look good and stay up through the wintertime. So that's a nice one to plant. So if you want to do it now, certainly the time to do it. The great thing about the early spring is that you've got the cream of the crop best selection to look at. So I mean, if you really want to see what the foliage is going to look like, then wait till the spring until we start getting those first few shipments of perennials in, and you can actually see the texture of the leaf, the color of the leaf, all of that. And then that's a good time to plant it.
Let's talk about pruning. Someone is asking, is it too early to prune fig trees? I know David knows all about fig trees. You have that giant one.
I wouldn't yet. It's a bit early. Matter of fact, it still remains to be seen whether you need to prune at all. If you have a mild winter like we have had to this point,
So far.
my figs at my house are still green all the way out to the tips. Now, what that means, there's green buds that are up there, which that means is that they're going to flower really early, and you can have a double crop of figs. And those early ones, Josh, are the ones that are really the most
Good
delicious.
ones. Yes.
And I mean, the biggest, juiciest, nicest figs. So my suggestion is wait and see. Don't cut. Last year, obviously, all the figs got cut to the ground.
Yep.
Mine were not the exception. However, the shrub I've got at the side of my house, it's back to 6 feet by 6 feet.
Wow.
It had hundreds of figs on it last year. Most of them, however, because it was all new growth, we didn't get very many that actually made it to ripening, maybe only 50 or 60, where we typically get many hundreds. So if we could have a mild winter, we will have many. That means I have some to share, Josh.
All right. Can you clear cut spirea?
Yes. I don't necessarily know why you'd need to. Typically, I go with it when people ask me how to prune spirea, I say ball it back up. Okay, so a spirea will get kind of up and a little bit leggy,
Like big wild hair.
like wild hair. You're right; it is very thin stems like hair. I typically just say shorten and ball it up. Okay, so get to where all of the stems are really tight together, and then make all your cuts the same spot above, atop of the earth.
But I would not do that on Van Hootie spirea, which is the bridal wreath van. That's the one
That's
that
the big
flowers really early. If you do that right now, you're cutting off almost all of your flowers for the spring. So leave that one until after it flowers. Now, most of your other shorter shrubby types, the flowers are really not all that. It's mostly about good looking foliage. You do get some flowers on them, so it's much less so. But the Van Hootie or the bridal wreath spirea, wait, let them flower first because they do flower very early. And then you can, like Austin said, you can ball them up or do whatever you need to do to get them back within bounds. And then you really need, as with them and forsythia, cut them back after they flower pretty hard, and then don't cut them anymore the rest of the year. That's what gives you those nice flowing arching growth habit that when you have the flowers set, the flower buds set on there at this time of year, it really makes that tremendous show in the spring.
Let's get to some more questions.
Okay. All
right.
My encore azaleas are showing signs of chlorosis. Okay to add nitrogen fertilizer now?
Okay, good question. And I want to know if your chlorosis is the whole plant or if it's more towards the interior, because azaleas in general do this. They will shed from the interior and a lot of that. So chlorosis means yellowing typically, and a lot of yellow leaves happen on the inside of your encore azalea. If the outside is still clean and green, then you probably don't have to do much. But if that outside is chlorotic and turning yellow as well, which is a common thing that happens with azaleas, then yes, you can add nitrogen fertilizer, but I would not do that yet. It's a little cool for fertilizer to really be activated. So I would wait until like kind of the early spring whenever things are just getting ready to pop and burst, and then add that nitrogen fertilizer to it, and hopefully that'll green them up.
Should go ahead and
Yeah,
do a
and if it
spoma
is
now,
indeed-
though,
A
right?
spoma would be fine. Any organic fertilizer is fine right now.
If it is indeed chlorosis, that's typically induced by the pH being out of whack, and many times if the pH is too high on those things, you can't uptake the amount of micronutrients that are in the soil. It just simply it can be there in abundance, but the plant has no access to it if your pH for whatever reason is too high. So azaleas are acid loving plants. They'd like to be down around 5.5 optimally to be able to be in the have the pH in the range where they can uptake the nutrition that's available. That might be they're deficient on nitrogen as well, but you might need to look into something that will help them to fight that chlorosis directly, and that would be to lower that pH and also give some other micronutrients that will supplement that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Sweet Bay Magnolia while we're on the topic of yellowing leaves. We have a question that asks, should my Sweet Bay Magnolia be yellowing and dropping leaves?
Yes, actually. This is a very common thing to happen. Sweet Bay Magnolia for us is sold as a semi-deciduous plant, okay? So a lot of times it will keep a number of its leaves. It does not keep all of its leaves. If you know magnolias at all, you know that they shed a lot. And Sweet Bay Magnolia is one that does it over the wintertime, typically. And this time of year...
Would it be more accurate to say it's semi-deciduous or semi-broadleaf?
Semi-evergreen, yeah. Either way. It's tomato, I guess. But so it is going to dry. I noticed on our tree lot yesterday, we've got some Sweet Bay Magnolias that are shedding some of those underneath leaves, but still have some green leaves atop of them. So it's not uncommon at all for some winters for Sweet Bay Mags to drop all their leaves. But it's
my
not
favorite
uncommon.
one too. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And the straight genus, the Magnolia virginiana, they really are decidedly more deciduous than some of the cultivars that are decidedly less so. So some of them really hold most of them, except if it's a really severe winter.
Additional support for Gardening Inside Out is brought to you by Bates Nursery and Garden Center, a third-generation nursery located in Nashville, Tennessee, and 20-time recipient for Nashville's Best Garden Center, offering the widest selection of new arrivals for fall, like specimen conifers, Japanese maples, and pansies in nearly every color. Open year-round, minutes from the heart of Nashville in beautiful Whites Creek, Tennessee. Browse their selection online anytime at batesnursery.com. Bates Nursery and Garden Center, beautifying Nashville since 1932.
Why are all my Arizona cypress turning brown and dying? Uh-oh.
Dying? Wow, that's weird. I mean, Arizona cypress certainly sheds like all evergreens do from the interior of the plant, and they're doing that right now, but dying is a different scenario. Arizona cypress took it on the chin last year, though, not going to lie. Like, a lot of them didn't necessarily die, but they really got injured from that freeze, okay? And the only other thing I can think of is that Arizona cypress really likes it on the dry side, so if you have a wet spot at all, Arizona cypress is not going to like you in that scenario. So if it's actually dying, that might be the case. I want to see some pictures, though, just to confirm that it's actually okay on that. If it's okay on the outermost part, then stick with it. This spring, it's going to have a flush, and it's going to cover up all that kind of ugly, hopefully, from last year's freeze. So
Cover up that
maybe stick with it. I don't know.
Yeah, there are a few things, whether it's conifers or broadleaf, either one, when they do interior yellowing of the foliage, it's a common misconception that the people interpret that as there being something wrong with it or that it's dying. And it's not. It's just the way the plant deals with foliage that's not contributing to photosynthesis. It just drops those off. And then, as Austin just said, that new flush of growth comes out in the spring, and then it's all back thick and full again.
And if they wanted to send pictures so Austin could take a look, where would they send those?
gardeninginsideout@gmail.com.
There you go.
Yep.
Cool. Send them.
Send your success stories too, not just your sick babies.
Yeah, things that you're proud of.
Please.
We want to
do
see
that.
all of it.
We
Yes.
want to see beauty.
Definitely
we do.
by the Friday before the broadcast.
Okay.
If not, we can always wait for the next week. All right, how can I keep milkweed from getting ravaged by aphids in the spring? I would say you can't.
Good luck. Aphids love milkweed.
It's
and
kind of what they do.
It's
Yeah.
particularly that oleander aphid, so it's those real bright yellow aphids.
They're
that'll
kind
get-
of pretty, though.
They are kind of
In a
pretty,
way.
and they don't do a terrible amount of damage to milkweed whatsoever, honestly. Honestly, leaving some of those aphids, y'all, is somewhat, a lot of times, beneficial for your garden because it brings in ladybugs and all those other insects that like to eat aphids. Aphids are like the little skittles of the
hors d'oeuvres, as they were.
I don't know why I went Skittles.
Because they're sweet.
They're sweet and tasty and bright and beautiful.
Skittles
But
of the
then
plant
aphids come
world.
in and just ravage them. And that's kind of what we want. We want a good garden, a balance of bad bugs, good bugs. And if the bad bug is not doing all that much to your plant or hurting it all that much, then kind of let them be. And like I said, they will a lot of times get taken care of without you having to do anything. Now, if you really hate it, y'all take your fingers and just run it along the stem and just smash and smush all those aphids.
Mine was
It's a gooey,
covered
yucky
this
fingers.
summer. Yeah, that sounds pretty yuck to me.
Yeah. But you can do it.
You can also just spray them off with, some light pressure water.
You got to buy with just water.
Just your-
Those
you don't have
little
to buy
rascals
the water.
cling on though.
They do.
They're, I mean,
They hold on tight, don't they, Dad? Yeah, okay.
I think I have a picture of mine from last year. I mean, mine was covered. They were just on top of
Yeah.
each other. Kind of gross, but also a little bit cool looking.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about
That's
one
bugs
plant
for you.
that I love and that I hate at the same time because I planted a type that I shouldn't have planted. Does passion flower vine leaf out from last year's growth or start from the ground? In my case, it starts growing and it never stops. It never loses its leaves. It just grows through the winter. It grows through the spring and summer, and it takes over. It grows from the ground.
Growing machine.
Growing machine. Now, the native variety can die back to the ground and come back from there, but they are really, really hardy plants. I know Tyler's had one for quite a while as well.
Yeah, that's Passiflora incarnata is the one that it produces fruit, and I've had it for several years. The original plant that I planted did eventually die and not come back, but don't worry because it produces enough offspring to last you for the rest of the decade.
A lifetime.
They just show up in spots that you were so randomly not expecting.
They shoot off
But they're
runners
really
and grow everywhere.
They're really easy to pull up when they're first coming up. Like, they are for
They're
me.
easy to pull up, but they keep going. Then it makes them go further.
But it
Then
doesn't.
they grow into your hydrangeas and they grow up your house.
Someone's biased.
And then the
somebody
trees.
had a bad time, didn't they?
I planted it in the wrong spot. I planted it in one of my garden beds right next to my house this was years ago, and I was just experimenting, and I will never get rid of that plant.
The thing is, it tempts you with its beauty.
Mine
The
hasn't
flower.
bloomed in about 5 years.
What?
It's
That's-
only the leaves.
That's
Everything else in that bed blooms. My hydrangeas, all of my grasses.
That does not sound
my
like-
echinacea.
our native passion.
I said
flower.
it was not.
Yeah.
It is not the native.
Well, the native is
It
great.
bloomed the first
Don't
3
let
years.
Caroline's bias sway you.
But I'm just
away from
saying,
it.
It is
make
the-
sure you know what you're planting and where you want to plant it. Do your research.
Sounds like wisteria with me years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
That's right.
Did you get rid
And
of it?
still with me.
Wisteria trauma.
Yeah,
No,
you
I
never
sold
will.
the house. I mean,
You sold the house to get away from it.
it was as good a reason as any.
Yep.
All right. We got a question from Miriam. Good morning, Miriam. We already gave her good morning, but here's another. We love you. What is the best plan to keep Bermuda out of beds ahead of the coming growing season?
Grass.
Oh, good luck.
Miriam, you give us the hardest questions. That's so hard. God, Bermuda.
What would you say, though? I mean, I'm just always pulling it.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, you
all
always
do.
pull it. She wants something better than that, I'm assuming. I mean, I guess like some sort of. The only thing I can think of is like a metal like barrier that you could like drive into the earth, and even
10 feet.
still, it's gonna hop over it. Like
Good string trimmer skills.
or go
Mary.
under.
I have it going under my sidewalk.
exactly, like it's relentless. It's like bamboo.
Yeah.
It's like I don't, Miriam. I love you, but I'm sorry. You got Bermuda, girl.
Good.
I think
Austin
we
gives
all
up
do.
so easily. I actually got a tiller attachment for my weed eater, and I'm going scorched earth.
Yeah, buddy.
Because that's
Good luck.
That's
But it
what
comes
you have
right
to do.
back.
How many times you gonna do it, Tyler? Though,
Every time
like,
you mow the
every week?
grass.
Yeah,
No, right now when it's all dormant, I can rip out most of the rhizomes, and then when they inevitably do pop up in their own special
The
way,
operative word
I can
being
keep pulling them.
most of.
Most.
most of.
It's impossible to get it out of there.
You
for the
leave
whole
just
growing
one,
season.
it's coming back.
Even a little one. Baby one.
a tiny root.
The
Yes.
same thing with passion flower. My crepe myrtles have really thin trunks. How do you bulk them up?
Well, first
Get
off,
them on a weight program.
first,
Protein.
yeah, protein.
You need NutriFast.
The first thing is time. Okay, so plants it takes time for them to swell. I don't know why the trunks are really thin unless it's in a very shady spot. I have noticed this with crepe myrtles in the shade. They will really shoot tall, and their stems will stay thin because of the amount of sunlight that they're not getting. So if it's in a shady spot, that may be what's going on. You can always top prune the crepe myrtle, to kind of keep them a little shorter, and that will swell out their trunks a little bit. But honestly, it's a waiting game, really. I mean,
my
it just
red
takes
rockers
time.
naturally has thin stems. I mean, it's not like a natchez that you're going to turn into a tree.
It also kind of depends on how many stems you decide to keep. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if you just get it down to 3 to 5 main stems or so, instead of having 20, if you have 20 stems, all those stems are going to be much thinner. So if you go ahead and thin that out to about 3 to 5 main canes, then you can see some swellage. Some swellage. That's not a word.
You just made up a word, Austin. Wow.
Swellage.
That's cool. Swellage.
It works. Y'all get it.
It does.
That's
We
like
understood.
something that's
How about
really
swole?
nice.
Swole. It gets swole.
Yeah.
Speaking of swole,
The clock is swollen to 8:59.
take us out, David Bates.
Well, it's been a great fact, fun, frivolity, and a lot of greenery,
Information,
garden, and we tried to put it all out there this week, like every week. So we thank you for turning in once again, and thank you for the very capable individuals we have around us: Josh, Caroline, Austin, Tyler,
And David.
Thank you all. Well, I try to
You're around
make
too.
my little contribution.
That's
a little
right.
bit. So,
All righty.
Anyway.
See you next week, folks. We'll be here from the Green Room Studios at Bates Nursery and Garden Center for Gardening Inside Out.
Thank you for tuning into the Gardening Inside Out podcast. If you're looking for more information or more from your hosts, don't forget that we have a live Saturday morning broadcast, 8 a.m. Central Time on YouTube and Facebook. You can also follow us on our Instagram channel. That's @Gardening Inside Out for more posts, reels, and in-depth dives to topics and things we've discussed on the show. If our content resonates with you, consider giving us a follow, like, and subscription on all of our social media pages. See you next time.